Welcome everyone to this episode of Ears to Hear. I want to discuss today God's timing, which is kind of an ironic phrase when you think about it because time and God aren't really compatible in the sense that God operates above our finite understanding of what time is. God doesn't operate in the same minutes and hours and days and weeks and years that we do, in the sense that because he is omnipotent and omniscient and omnipresent, he is able to make things happen without the bounds of time, if that makes sense. He can foresee what will happen based on who we are, and that does not necessitate that he will control our lives, but he just knows the predictability of who we are, what our souls are capable of. He's tapped into acutely and knows exactly and precisely what we will do in a given situation. So that doesn't take away our agency and our choosing of it, but I want to talk about God's timing and divine delays. And so there's instances in the scriptures that discuss this, but really importantly, what do you experience in your life now that feels like is just testing your patience? Like God is just up there testing you and just making you wait for something. What is it that you want? And if you could have it now, you would. Is it a relationship with a lovely boy or girl? Is it a promotion at work? Is it a career? Is it a hobby turning into a career? Is it what you truly love to do that you're able to turn into a living, something that you earn income from? Is it a friend, a longing for a friend to come back in your life after a falling out? There's lots of things you could be waiting for. It could be you don't know what you want to study in school, so you're waiting for God to impress upon your heart what path you should take. Personally, when I think about my life, there's a few things I can think of that have either been divinely delayed, and it's always the case that you don't understand why, and you're frustrated and you're impatient. But for me personally, I am somebody where I have certain dreams and ambitions that I want to accomplish in my life. And when it comes to a career, in the sense of what I do to make money to live, I've never felt many strong impressions on what that is. Like growing up in high school, I was surrounded by a bunch of men who were financial advisors and studied finance. And so I kind of leaned on that. And I always loved the idea of entrepreneurship. My dad started his own pool and landscape company. So entrepreneurship excited me, and the idea of building a business and being my own boss and, taking certain sacrifices of maybe not making as much money, but having my time, that just made sense to me. Or working longer, but I'm answering to myself instead of someone else. That's a sacrifice I think I'd be willing to make. So for me, trying to involve God in my career, the feelings I've gotten from the Spirit of God have been, it doesn't really matter what I do. And it's not that God doesn't care, but in my life, what I do for a living, it could be a number of different things, I think, and God could still, assuming I'm faithful, accomplish his purposes through me as an instrument. That would be my dream, to still be able to do that. And I know some people who, they feel divinely inspired, they need to be a doctor. They feel that in their heart, and they need to go to school and study and do 8, 12 years of school to make that happen. Thank goodness that wasn't me, because I don't think I'd be able to do that. I lasted 2 years in college before I dropped out. But my career and my progress, and I'll just share this since it's happening live, and I mentioned in the last episode that things were changing in my life with my career. But in October of 2024, I was broke. And this wasn't the first time I had been broke. I had been broke a year earlier in 2023. Um, and I'd been kind of broke before, but I had like parents' help at the time. But in the sense of like, I'm talking broke. Like in 2024, I had a full-time job. I quit to travel, and while I was traveling, I ended up breaking some things of someone else's that I had to pay back, and there was lots of generosity involved. But long story short, I came home from a 4-month long trip and excursion with less than $100 to my name, and was able to like barely like be floating. And I know people have been in worse situations, and I had actually been in a worse situation in a relationship where we had tens of thousands of dollars of student loan debt, and even though our bank account was more, we still had that debt. So my mentality with the money was like, as long as I'm not in debt, we up. And that's how I felt in 2024. And something about being broke, I just remember being in those like emotional moments of, God, like my plan was always to like do what I want for work and make a lot of money. And I didn't have like a really solid plan on how I was going to make that happen. But end of 2024, we're at the beginning of 2026. So a year and a half later, I am in a drastically different circumstance when it comes to a career. And I can go on record saying it is the grace of God and by the hand of God and me paying offerings to God, as well as increasing my faith in Him, that, well, one, I'm not broke, thank goodness, but my career situation has been more fruitful and better than I could have ever imagined. And the place I want to come from talking about this is not as like oh, look at this, look at my situation. We're talking less than 18 months ago. God took me in my very dire circumstances, and I know in and of myself alone, I would not have been able to, in that short of time, made much of a difference. Like as much of a difference has occurred in my life by myself, that was not happening. I promise you. I witnessed that. The amount of things that happen like day to day for a string of months in the first or in the second serious job I got were just too coincidental, and not even coincidence. It's beyond coincidence. It was shocking. It was like days where I would plead where I needed this to happen for a chain of like a domino, the domino effect to occur, and that happened. And I just look at the way things worked out where I had quit. I mean, just to give you, I don't know, y'all don't know me, but like to give you my story, I worked in mortgages for a long time and I learned a lot, great, whatever. And I quit before my excursion. But while I had quit, I still needed to make money to pay for my trips coming up. So I got a part-time job at a moving company. Well, that moving company, and the way I got that was through a friend who had been through a similar experience in my life. He had reached out to me, even though I didn't know who he was at the time. And so like that was divine and beautiful. But that moving company hired me back at the end of my trip when I was broke. And I was so over that nature of work and working a moving job. And I was humbled that I was in a situation where that was the work I had to do to survive. And I didn't mind. I didn't felt like I was above it, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do. It was, I need to do this. And, I've been in places in my life where it's like, okay, I grew up doing manual labor with my dad. And if worst case scenario, if I have to move home, I'm not too above that. I'm not too prideful that's what I'd have to do to get by and work for my dad again. And so I'm at this moving company and it's just brutal. I just really was not happy and was just surviving. And it was so much so that I was getting impatient and frustrated, and I quit that and I got a job at a local restaurant down the street. And I just thought, I'll save money on gas. It's closer. I'll make less money, but my hours will be flexible. I get tips. It wasn't even a week and a half of being there. I hadn't even waited one table before I met somebody there who comes into play later. But one of my best friends gave me a shot at a job that I maybe didn't deserve as a sales development representative at his company, and was able to at least get me an interview, which is, at that point I was willing to take anything. And it was a job cold calling. And if you've ever cold called, one, what a great skill, and it gets too much hate. But if you've never done it, the idea of it, is brutal. And it is brutal. It's the trenches is what my coworkers and I would call it. And miraculously, I got that job. Well, that company had a lot of shifts going on and changes and people getting let go. And I can't say I was much happier, but at least I had like an income now. And somebody I had met at the restaurant right before I quit, she left the job to go do cold calling at another company that, for my circumstance at the time, was better suited for me. And so that led me to get that job. And this job and the experience that happened and those little daily experiences I mentioned led me within an 8-month period to get a promotion, which for the last 4 or 5 months I've done, which has directly led me to fall into a position with somebody else I know where they need the skills I've developed in the last year to work for them now. And so I start that job soon. Anyway, that was maybe more info than you wanted. I'm just getting this out there to show, like, that string of events was so bizarre, so fortuitous, and in my human finite brain, like, it's so easy to chalk it up to just random coincidence. Well, whatever. I promise that wasn't. Like, the way everything dropped for me in the last like 18 months has been nothing short of God's hand blessing my life. And sometimes I don't feel deserving of it with the choices I make and the stupid things I do to forget God and the sins I commit. But how beautiful, and I want to cherish this. God, it felt like I was being delayed. And maybe I'll get delayed again. Maybe this new job just hits the absolute fan and I'm back on my, just barely getting back on my feet. But it just, looking back, it's like, wow, God is an accelerator in your life. And what God can do to you in a short-term period, I mean, your efforts and energy can be multiplied, where if you give that to God, if God makes you wait 5 years, but then you just still trust in him, I bet you in a 5-month period, God can get you farther ahead as if you had put in 10 years in that 5 months. So if you're like let's visualize this. If for 5 years you're just in a rut and in the same place and not growing, and you're trying to build something or you're waiting for something, whatever your situation is, if it's taken you 5 years, if you hold on to that faith and keep crying after God and keep trusting in him, those next 5 months, and let's say somebody else was going on that same path but didn't turn their back on God and despised him for it, in 5 months after that 5 years, it will be as if you were on this like rocket ship for 10 years. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Whereas the other person won't maybe see that growth. And so you'll look back at the end of that 5 months and be like, wow, yeah, this was skewed. The majority of the last 5 years and 5 months of my life has been hardship and trials and suffering. But the last 5 months have made those 5 years well worth the wait. That's always the case with God, right? It was so worth the wait. You hear that about people who had to wait a while before they found their person in life. And it's like, they always go, I would have waited 10 years to meet this person. And as a single person, you're like, oh, brother, like, I'm tired of hearing this crap. Like, I'll believe it when I see it. But I really think that's true. I really do. In my faith, we serve a 2-year mission where we go and evangelize and proselytize the gospel, and we go and teach the word of the Lord to others all around the world. Some people go closer to home, some people go farther, and it's 2 years, 24 months. As an 18-year-old boy, emphasis on the boy, that was a very long time. That was 10% of my life that I was giving up, where all my friends, everyone I knew, was going to go to college and be 2 years ahead. And that's always the way you look at it. It's like, man, everyone's going to get ahead of me in these 2 years. Wow, I'm going to miss out on so many chances and opportunities. I feel like I grew as a man by 5 to 8 years in the lessons I learned and the hardships I had to go through by nature of where I was in the world, in a third world country, doing what I was doing every single day with no technology, just grit and analog tools, paperback books and pens and journals, no access to the internet. It seems a little counterintuitive, but you just tapped into God for 2 years. I felt like I came back, one, physically, I felt like my back was thrown out. I felt like, oh man, I feel like my body was starting to creak, and I'm only 20 years old. Just again, by nature of how tough the work was. But mentally and spiritually, it was like leaps and bounds. So yeah, I'm coming back as a 20-year-old. I only have a semester done in college. All my friends are like junior year, they're doing crazy internships, they're making good money. And here I am, like, I got nothing on my resume, but the life experience I just gained was because God can do that to you. You give God the timetable of your life and just hold on. One of the best verses, one of the best 2 words ever spoken. Besides the 3 words of He is risen, the best 2 words spoken in the Bible might just be still. Christ telling us to be still. That's so hard. That's so hard, especially with the buzz that goes on in modern culture and just the nonstop. It really is like a buzz in the back of your head, right? Just all the noise pollution that we let in just totally prevents us from being still and trusting in the Lord. But to be still, trust that He is God and that He will deliver you. I mean, how many of us would you be able to look at Christ today and say, I have indefinite faith? If you weren't going to give me a single blessing from now until I'm 90 years old on my deathbed, but it was all for the next life, would I still be faithful? Now that's an extreme, and I can't go on record saying I'd fully have that faith in God. I don't know many people personally who could. I don't doubt that there is people out there like that. But how beautiful if you could develop that like indefinite mindset on, I'm going to sit back, I will make the best choices I can, but I'm turning the timeline over to God. I've had conversations with friends recently where it's very easy to go like, okay, by next year. And like a very prevalent topic in my generation is getting married, starting a family. And as a 26-year-old guy turning 27 this year, it's easy to go, man, if by this time next year I'm not with someone, and I don't really feel this way, truthfully, but it's easy to like fall into that thought process. And I have friends who do. And what that's doing though is you are giving God a timeline, because what's your threat? You're like threatening, okay, if I'm not this by then, by this time that I'm deciding, man, I'll be crushed. Okay, well, a year from now is a little arbitrary. Like what's 12 months versus 13 months? What's 13 versus 14? What if the person's just on the other side of that timeline you gave? So if you trust in God, and you really do, and you kind of have to, like, if you don't want your life to be just depressing and way harder than it needs to be, the process of trusting in God is a much more hopeful mindset and outlook of life. Like there's a reason why statistically on average Christians are just happier people. It's perspective, baby. It's how we view the world and are able to give all this to God and let God multiply. Let God be the reaper of what seeds we are sowing now in our lives. And so maybe it's with work too. And I had done that. There was like goals where it's like, okay, by this time, I want to hit X net worth. And again, kind of arbitrary. Now, does God reward ambition and desire that's wholesome and good and rooted in Him? 100%. I have written goals. I have very specific, like 6 month, 3, 6, 1 year, 5 year, 10-year goals that some of them have numbers attached to. But am I attached to that specific outcome, or is it more so I am aligned and I'm on the track pursuing these things that are righteous desires? And I have that written. This is the way I word it, and it's just, my language is a little funny, but it's essentially saying, like, this is not to say my faith relies on these outcomes coming to pass. Rather, these are guideposts to keep me going in the direction of these wholesome pursuits. So that's from what I've learned in life, that's the better way to do it, is to detach from the outcome, focus on your input, and trust God's timetable. It's so hard to do that, but how much anxiety do you cause yourself when you're constantly imposing timelines that are arbitrary and mean nothing, when you could just sit back, let God take the wheel? Yes, cheesy lyric, but let him drive you around, right? You pick where you're headed, pick the career path you want to go down, pick the type of men or women you want to date, be precise about that process. More importantly, become somebody deserving of these things that you want in your life. Don't be a bum, but then be still and know that He is God. Let these good things come to fruition when they are supposed to. Why would you want to rush something? Why would you want to do that? Don't rush anything that God has in store for you that is going to make you completely not care about the win anymore. I really think God's blessings will be so good that the win question, the timing question, you will detach from completely once you understand how good it is. And it's hard. I know it's hard. But it's a daily practice of, I've decided what I want. I'm taking God as my guide. He's going to help me hopefully achieve these things. Again, whether it is career, friendship, relationship, family, having kids, a hobby, doesn't matter what it is. Don't rush it. Don't rush it. Enjoy this process, because this timeline in your mind will like crunch into into nothing because of how amazing that blessing is, where you will be one of those people who says, I would have waited longer. I would have. Maybe it's not that you have to want to wait longer, but that you would have been willing to if you knew it was going to be this good. If that makes sense. A couple scriptures to support this. Well, first, I mean, a story of Abraham and Sarah waiting for the birth of Isaac, right? Until they're old hags, right? And it got past the point of logic. It got past the point of like, this doesn't even work anymore. Like, how will we have a son, and how will all nations be blessed in our name and our posterity when we don't even, like, the whole childbirth process is in question now? How is that even going to happen? So, be still. Know that He is God. He can make things come to pass. Lazarus. I was going to say Lazarus' death and coming back to life, right? Lazarus would not have chosen that. But I wonder if we could have had Lazarus' journals post him coming back to life, being risen by the Lord. I wonder what his outlook on life was then. I wonder how many more fruitful things happened for him daily because of his new perspective of realizing what had just transpired in his life. 2 Peter, and again, reminder of the logic of God. It's hard, but do not overlook this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day. God has a timeless perspective. The urgency, the hustle, bustle, rush of the world, the deadlines we have, God's not on those. He's not on those. So he can retroactively make things fruitful for you if you're patient. Psalm 92, before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. God expands creation. He was, even before the worlds were, he was. He is and was and will be forever, from all eternity to all eternity. And is it Jeremiah, where God says to him, before I formed you in the belly, I knew you. He knew very well that he would become a prophet of God. He knew that. What does he know about you that he's not telling you? He's not telling you because he wants you to just have faith in him. Just trust him. Ecclesiastes 3:11, he has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. This encourages us to take into account the beauty of God's scheduling. When we want to speed up the schedule and move events forward and things, we're essentially telling God, no, I'm in charge here. I'm gonna overlook your broader grand design, and let me throw this next year together for myself, and this is what's gonna happen. Let's not talk to God like that. That's not recommended. So all of this to say, friends, loved ones, whatever, let God lead your clock. Don't give God deadlines that you don't want to find out you actually weren't ready for. Because sometimes you think you're ready. If you would have asked me 18 months ago if I could have done what I'm doing now for a career, no shot. Would I have said I wanted it then? Yes, I would have been like, sure, by all means. I would have failed. I would have failed so bad. I would have fallen really bad. And don't know how I would have gotten up from that. And God didn't let me do that. He knew what I was capable of, and he's kind of he's breadcrumbed me a little bit into the right place. And sometimes I go down the wrong path, and he goes, and I know to turn back around. So thanks for listening. That's today's episode. We'll catch you next time. Bye.